July 14, 1943. A dusty hillside outside Biscari, Sicily. 73 Italian and German prisoners stand in a field, hands raised, weapons dropped. They've surrendered. Under the Geneva Convention, they're entitled to food, water, medical treatment, and humane detention. Instead, they're about to be executed. Captain John Compton of the 180th Infantry Regiment walks down the line. His men have machine guns positioned on both flanks. The prisoners don't understand what's happening. They think they're being processed, registered, sent to a POW camp. One of them, an Italian teenager barely 17 years old, tries to ask a question in broken English. Compton doesn't answer. He raises his hand, signals his men. The machine guns open fire. For 90 seconds, the guns keep firing. Bodies fall. Some prisoners try to run. They're cut down. Some play dead. They're finished with rifle shots to the head. When the guns finally stop, all 73 are dead. Compton walks through the bodies, checking, making sure. An hour later, 2 miles away, Sergeant Horace West does the same thing. 37 more prisoners. Same result. This is the Biscari Massacre. And it happened because George S. Patton gave an order 3 days before the invasion. An order that was never written down, never officially recorded, but was heard by hundreds of officers. This is what Patton said, and why the U.S. Army tried to bury it for 70 years. March 1943, North Africa. George Patton arrived with a reputation and a mandate. The reputation, hard-charging, aggressive commander who got results. The mandate, rebuild American II Corps after the disaster at Kasserine Pass. The Germans had humiliated American forces in February, overrun positions, captured thousands, exposed tactical incompetence. Eisenhower needed someone to restore discipline, restore confidence, restore fighting spirit in green troops who'd just gotten destroyed. Patton was the man for the job. He arrived wearing ivory-handled pistols and custom uniform, immediately started cracking down, enforced strict dress codes, fined soldiers for not wearing helmets, personally slapped men he thought were cowards, ruthless, uncompromising. Exactly what the situation required. Within weeks, II Corps transformed from defeated, demoralized rabble into disciplined fighting force. Patton's methods were harsh, but they worked. By May 1943, American forces were winning, pushing Germans back, taking prisoners, avenging Kasserine. Eisenhower was pleased, promoted Patton to command 7th Army, gave him responsibility for the upcoming invasion of Sicily, Operation Husky, scheduled for July 10, 1943. The invasion would be massive. 160,000 Allied troops, American, British, Canadian, landing on beaches across southern Sicily. Objective: capture the island, knock Italy out of the war, open route to mainland Europe. Patton's 7th Army would land on western beaches. Montgomery's 8th Army on the eastern side. It was supposed to be a joint operation, coordinated. But Patton saw it as a competition. He wanted to beat Montgomery to Messina, wanted to prove American forces could move faster and fight harder than the British. He pushed his planners hard, demanded aggressive timetables, maximum speed, maximum violence, maximum results. But there was a problem. Intelligence reports indicated Italian and German forces on Sicily were preparing to fight. Not surrender, not withdraw, fight. That meant the invasion would be costly, bloody. American casualties would be high, and Patton's philosophy of warfare couldn't accept that. He believed in momentum, in shock, in breaking the enemy's will through overwhelming aggression. He didn't want his men bogged down in house-to-house fighting, didn't want them taking casualties while processing prisoners, didn't want anything slowing the advance. July 7, 1943, 3 days before the invasion. Patton addressed his officers. Final briefing, standard pre-invasion speech, motivation, objectives, coordination. But according to multiple witnesses, Patton said something else, something that wasn't in the prepared remarks, something that was never written in any official order. He told them to be tough, to be ruthless, to show no mercy. And then, according to sworn testimony given later, Patton said this: "If the enemy keeps fighting after you've told them to surrender, kill them. Don't bother taking prisoners if it will slow you down. This is a race to Messina. We're not running a detention camp, we're running a goddamn war." The officers in the room understood what Patton meant, or thought they did. Don't take prisoners. Don't waste time with surrendered enemy soldiers. Keep moving. Kill anything that gets in the way. Was that really what Patton said? Or did the officers misinterpret? The evidence is contradictory. Patton never admitted giving such an order. Never put it in writing. But multiple officers testified under oath that they heard it, that they understood Patton wanted speed over legality, results over rules, victory over everything else. July 10, 1943. The invasion began. American forces hit the beaches at Gela and Licata. Resistance was lighter than expected. Italian coastal troops surrendered quickly. German forces withdrew inland. By July 13th, Patton's 7th Army was advancing rapidly, taking ground. Overwhelming scattered resistance. Everything was going according to plan. Then came July 14th. 2 separate incidents, 2 different units, same result. The first happened near Biscari Airfield. Captain John Compton's company from the 180th Infantry Regiment encountered a group of Italian soldiers, about 45 men. They'd been defending a pillbox. American artillery had pounded their position. When the infantry advanced, the Italians surrendered. Hands up, weapons dropped. Standard procedure would be to disarm them, search them, send them to the rear under guard for processing. But Compton didn't do that. He ordered his men to march the prisoners to a nearby field, line them up, and shoot them. Some of his men hesitated. "This is wrong," one sergeant said. "These men surrendered." Compton was blunt. "We have orders. No prisoners. Keep moving." The sergeant obeyed. He had no choice. Disobeying a direct order in combat is mutiny, punishable by death. So the men lined up the prisoners and opened fire with machine guns. All 45 prisoners were killed. Later that same day, Sergeant Horace West of the 45th Infantry Division was tasked with guarding 37 prisoners, Germans and Italians. They'd surrendered after a brief firefight. West was supposed to march them to a collection point, but he was exhausted, angry. He'd lost friends in the fighting. Didn't want to waste time babysitting enemy soldiers. So he made a decision. He marched the prisoners to a remote ravine, ordered them to sit down. Then he pulled out his Thompson submachine gun and shot them all. 37 men, unarmed, sitting, executed. West reloaded 3 times, made sure everyone was dead, then returned to his unit. Reported the prisoners had been transferred. Nobody questioned it, not immediately. But word spread. Other soldiers had seen the bodies. had seen West marching prisoners away and coming back alone. Within 24 hours, both incidents were reported up the chain of command. By July 16th, the reports reached divisional headquarters. By July 18th, they reached Patton. The reaction was immediate and divided. Some officers were outraged. This is a war crime. Murder. We have to investigate. Court-martial everyone involved. Others were dismissive. It's war. Things happen. The enemy was fighting. Our men reacted. Move on. Patton's initial response was the second camp. He didn't want investigations, didn't want courts-martial, didn't want anything that would slow the advance or demoralize troops. But Eisenhower heard about the incidents, demanded answers, demanded investigations. Patton had no choice. He ordered a formal inquiry. Military police interviewed witnesses, collected evidence, built cases against Compton and West. Both men were charged with murder, violation of the laws of war, faced potential death sentences if convicted. The trials began in August 1943, still in Sicily, still during active operations. Compton's defense was simple. I was following orders. General Patton told us not to take prisoners if it would slow the advance. I interpreted that to mean I should eliminate surrendered enemy forces rather than detail guards to escort them. The prosecution argued that no order justifies executing prisoners of war, that Compton knew the Geneva Convention, knew the rules, chose to violate them. The trial lasted 3 days. The court-martial board deliberated for 4 hours. Verdict: not guilty. Compton was acquitted. The reasoning was that he'd acted on what he believed were orders from higher command, that he'd made a decision in the chaos of combat, that while his actions were regrettable, they didn't rise to the level of criminal murder. West's trial was different. He had no orders to kill prisoners. He'd acted alone, made an independent decision. His defense argued temporary insanity. Combat stress, the loss of friends, the exhaustion and fear and rage that combat produces. The prosecution argued premeditation. West had marched the prisoners away from witnesses, had chosen a location where the executions wouldn't be observed, had reloaded multiple times, had ensured everyone was dead. That's not temporary insanity. That's calculated murder. The court-martial board agreed. Verdict: guilty. Sentence: life in prison. West was dishonorably discharged, sent to a military prison, served 1 year. Then Patton intervened, used his influence, got the sentence commuted. West was released, returned to duty, served the rest of the war, was never punished beyond that 1 year. The Biscari Massacre was buried, classified. The reports were sealed. The trials were not publicized. The press never heard about it. The American public never knew. For decades, it remained one of the war's dirty secrets. Known to a few officers, discussed in whispers, but never officially acknowledged. Why the cover-up? Because Patton was too valuable. Because the Army didn't want to admit American soldiers had committed war crimes. Because the political fallout would have been catastrophic. This was 1943. The war was far from over. America needed heroes, needed victories, needed to maintain public support for the war effort. Admitting that American soldiers had executed prisoners would have undermined everything, would have given German propaganda a field day, would have made it harder to prosecute Germans for similar crimes later. So the decision was made. Bury it. Seal the records. Move on. And if Patton had given an order, however vague, that could be interpreted as authorizing the killing of prisoners, then the army had a systemic problem. Not just a few rogue soldiers, but a command culture that encouraged war crimes. The question of what Patton actually said haunted the investigations. Multiple officers testified they'd heard him say something about not taking prisoners, but the exact words varied. Some remembered, "Don't slow down for prisoners." Others remembered, "Kill anyone who resists." Others remembered, "We're not in the prisoner-taking business." The inconsistency suggested people heard what they wanted to hear, or remembered what justified their actions, or were trying to protect Patton or themselves. Patton was called to testify. Asked directly, "Did you order your men not to take prisoners?" His answer was carefully worded. "I told my officers to be aggressive, to move fast, to not let administrative concerns slow the advance. If some of them interpreted that as authorization to kill prisoners, they misunderstood. That was not my intent." "Did you say anything that could have been interpreted that way?" "I may have used strong language, I often do, but I never ordered violations of the laws of war. Never ordered murder." The investigators couldn't prove otherwise. There was no written order, no recording, just conflicting testimony from officers trying to remember what was said in a heated pre-invasion briefing. So Patton was cleared. Officially, he gave no order. The killings were unauthorized actions by individual soldiers. Compton and West acted on their own initiative, made their own decisions. Patton bore no responsibility. Case closed. Except everyone involved knew that wasn't true, knew that Patton's command style, his rhetoric, his emphasis on speed and aggression, had created an environment where some soldiers felt empowered to commit atrocities, where the rules didn't apply, where winning mattered more than morality. That's the real scandal of Biscari. Not just that prisoners were killed, but that the command climate made it possible, made it likely, made it almost inevitable. Patton wanted aggressive soldiers. He got them. Wanted men who wouldn't hesitate, who wouldn't question orders, who'd do whatever it took to win. He got them. But those same qualities, pushed to their extreme, produce war crimes, produce men who'll execute prisoners because it's faster than processing them, produce men who'll commit atrocities and justify them as following the spirit of their commander's intent. Patton never fully grasped this, or if he did, he didn't care. For him, war was about winning, about breaking the enemy's will, about imposing your vision through violence. Morality was a peacetime luxury. In war, you did what worked. And if that meant some prisoners got killed, if that meant some rules got bent, so be it. Better to win dirty than lose clean. That philosophy defined Patton's entire career, made him effective, made him successful, made him one of the most feared and respected commanders of World War II. But it also made him dangerous, made him someone who couldn't be fully trusted, who had to be watched, who could, if left unchecked, cause more harm than good. Eisenhower understood this, kept Patton on a leash, used him when aggressive action was needed, sidelined him when diplomacy was required. Never gave him independent strategic command, never let him make policy. Because Patton's instincts, while tactically brilliant, were strategically reckless. The Biscari Massacre proved that Patton's command style could produce results, but could also produce atrocities, could win battles, but could lose the moral high ground. And in a war being fought partly for ideological reasons, partly to prove that democracy was superior to fascism, the moral high ground mattered. The massacre remained classified until the 1970s, when researchers started digging through World War II archives. found references to courts-martial in Sicily, found sealed trial transcripts, started asking questions. By the 1980s, the full story was public. Books were written, documentaries were made, veterans were interviewed. Some admitted they'd known about Biscari, had known prisoners were being killed, had said nothing because it was war, because everyone was doing things they shouldn't, because speaking up would have made you a traitor. The revelations were uncomfortable, forced a reckoning with the myth of the good war. World War II had been portrayed as a morally unambiguous conflict. Democracy versus fascism. Good versus evil. America and its allies fighting for freedom and human rights. The reality was more complicated. American soldiers committed atrocities, not on the scale of Axis forces, not systematically, but they happened. Biscari, Dachau, where American soldiers executed SS guards. Numerous smaller incidents that never made it into official reports. And in almost every case, command climate played a role. Leaders who emphasized aggression over restraint, who valued results over rules, who created environments where soldiers felt empowered to cross lines. Patton was the most visible example, but he wasn't the only one. The Biscari Massacre also raised questions about accountability. West was convicted, served 1 year, then released. Compton was acquitted, returned to duty, continued his career. Both men killed over 100 prisoners combined, and neither faced serious consequences. Why? Because the Army protected them. Because admitting the full scope of what happened would have been too damaging. Because in 1943, with the war still raging, institutional preservation mattered more than justice. That calculation is understandable, maybe even defensible, in the context of total war. When millions of lives hung in the balance, when the survival of civilization was at stake, you make compromises. You protect your institutions. You bury inconvenient truths. You move on. But those compromises have costs. They erode trust. They undermine the moral authority you're claiming to fight for. They create precedents. If American soldiers can execute prisoners and face no consequences, why should enemy soldiers be held accountable? The Nuremberg trials prosecuted German officers for war crimes, executed some, imprisoned others. The legal basis was clear. Superior orders are not a defense. You have a duty to refuse illegal orders. You're responsible for your actions. But Compton used superior orders as his defense at Biscari, and was acquitted. So which standard applies? The one we demand of defeated enemies, or the one we apply to ourselves? That's the uncomfortable question Biscari raises, and the Army never answered it. Just buried the evidence, sealed the files, hoped it would go away. For 30 years it worked. Then the files were opened, and the questions came back. What did Patton say? What did he intend? Did he bear responsibility for what his men did? The official answer remains: no order was given. Soldiers acted independently. Patton was not responsible. But the historical consensus is different. Patton created a climate, set expectations, used rhetoric that could be interpreted as authorizing atrocities. And when atrocities happened, he protected the perpetrators. That makes him complicit. Not legally, but morally. Patton's defenders argue he was a product of his time, that war is inherently brutal, that judging 1943 by modern standards is unfair. That's partially true. Context matters. But even in 1943, executing prisoners was illegal. The Geneva Convention existed. The laws of war existed. American military justice existed. Patton knew the rules, chose to push boundaries, chose to prioritize speed over legality. And men died because of that choice. 73 at Biscari Airfield, 37 in the ravine, 110 human beings, soldiers, some conscripts, some volunteers, some Nazis, some just Italians trying to survive. All entitled to protection under international law, all executed, because American soldiers thought they had permission, thought their commander wanted it, thought the mission required it. That's the legacy of Biscari, not just the deaths, but the precedent, the message it sent, that in the right circumstances with the right justification, the rules don't apply, that victory excuses atrocity, that leaders can create conditions for war crimes and escape accountability by maintaining plausible deniability. Patton maintained that deniability, never admitted giving an order, never admitted responsibility, went to his grave insisting he'd done nothing wrong, and the army supported that version, protected him, protected itself, protected the myth. But the truth leaks out eventually. Archives get opened, witnesses come forward, historians dig deeper, and what they find is uncomfortable. A great general, a brilliant tactician, a man who helped win World War II, also a man whose words, whose command style, whose priorities contributed to one of the worst American war crimes of the war. Both things can be true. Patton can be a hero and a villain, a genius and a monster. History isn't simple. People aren't simple. And war reveals complexities we'd rather not acknowledge. Biscari forces us to acknowledge them, to grapple with the fact that our side committed atrocities too, that good men did evil things, that the line between legitimate combat and murder is thinner than we want to believe, and that leaders matter. What they say matters. What they prioritize matters. What they tolerate matters. Patton said things that some men interpreted as permission to kill. Patton prioritized speed over due process. Patton tolerated, even protected, men who committed murder. He didn't pull the triggers, but his fingerprints are all over those 110 deaths. That's what historians mean when they say Biscari still horrifies. Not just the act itself, but the complicity, the cover-up, the fact that justice was never served, the fact that the most powerful military in the world chose institutional protection over accountability, chose myth over truth, for 30 years, and even now, 80 years later, hasn't fully reckoned with what happened, hasn't acknowledged the systemic failures, hasn't reformed the command culture that made Biscari possible. The victims are forgotten. Their names aren't memorialized. Their families never got justice. They're just statistics in a classified report, footnotes in history books, uncomfortable truths that complicate the narrative. That's the final horror of Biscari. Not just that it happened, but that we've chosen to forget.